I want to say greetings to each and every one of you, Khoapa, and welcome. Welcome to another round of Tech and Future Talk here on Thursdays on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and on livinginblack.com. My name is Keedy White, aka The Conscious Rasta. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live. We come at you from 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 12 noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. East BST, and 8 p.m. East Africa time. We get together with you and we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives, entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date is Thursday, the second day of October, 2025 in the Gregorian calendar, the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6266 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we have realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. Hey, am supposed to have a guest, and I'm anticipating the guest will check in with me at any given time. I have been on the line waiting for the guest, attempting to connect with the guest for 20 minutes now. He is in South Africa, and I know some of you have been eagerly anticipating today's conference or today's conversation for some time. And we connect with a scholar from South Africa, and he is at the Witwatersrand University there in Johannesburg. And unfortunately, I am not able to connect with him because he is having a difficult time logging in. I did get a message from him, but that was hours ago. Maybe it was early in the morning or yesterday. And I'm going to do the best I can to do the best that I can. I am not comfortable with the situation as it stands. I will be honest with you, and hopefully he will not disappoint me. I've been emailing him multiple times, WhatsApping him multiple times, and he's not. I even put the link up on his Facebook page. I couldn't send him a message via that social media. So we're going to do the best we can with what we got. I don't know what is happening. My guest was regarded as our expert on a complex set of affairs taking place in Southern Africa in real time. Dr. Shechaba Khoapa serves as an assistant professor and research scholar in African studies, career and technology education, and visual communication technology at the University of the Witwatersrand. He is also an independent consultant specializing in public policy analysis, business strategy, data analysis, organizational leadership, instructional design, and multimedia development. Dr. Khoapa's work bridges the gap between academic theory and practical policy, with a strong emphasis on social justice, African identity, and practical policy. And Dr. Khoapa's work bridges the gap between academic theory and practical policy with a strong emphasis on social justice, African identity, and grassroots empowerment. He has contributed significantly to academic discourse on post-apartheid South Africa, Pan-Africanism, and public policy. I'm going to go ahead and share with you the biography of Dr. Shechaba Khoapa because he most likely will be joining us at any given time. I know how difficult it can be to log in from the African continent, although I will say of all of the countries, South Africa has about the best or better of the internet. Biography of Dr. Shechaba Khoapa, born in 1975 during apartheid era South Africa, Dr. Khoapa's early life was shaped by political unrest and exile caused by white racist apartheid. In 1978, he relocated to the United States at age 3 due to the political circumstances. He pursued higher education in both the U.S. and South Africa. He got his Bachelor of Science in Visual Communication Technology at Bowling Green State University. He got his Master's of Education in Career and Technology Education at Bowling Green State University, Ohio. He got his PhD in African Studies and Research from Howard University in Washington, D.C. Currently, Dr. Khoapa serves as an assistant professor and research scholar in African Studies, Career and Technology Education, and Visual Communication Technology at the University of the Witwatersrand. 1 second while I clear this out of my throat. All right, sorry about that, but it's got to go. It's got to go. So he got his PhD in African Studies and Research from Howard University, Washington, D.C. Currently, Dr. Khoapa serves as assistant professor and research scholar in African Studies, Career and Technology Education, and Visual Communication Technology at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. Not Johannesburg. Yeah, in Johannesburg, South Africa. He is also an independent consultant specializing in public policy analysis, business strategy, data analysis, organizational leadership, instructional design, multimedia development. And last part of this identity, or a couple more parts, Dr. Khoapa's work bridges the gap between academic theory and practical policy, with a strong emphasis on social justice, African identity, and grassroots empowerment. He has contributed significantly to academic discourse on post-apartheid South Africa, Pan-Africanism, and public policy, publishing the following: his dissertation, entitled A Case Study on Poverty and Equality in Post-Apartheid South Africa, examining government policy and practices from 1994 to 2010. He has contributed to the book Poverty and Inequality in Post-Apartheid South Africa, 1994 to 2014, a critical examination of government and development beyond the, quote, 20 years of freedom, unquote, milestone. He's published another couple of papers I'm going to cite here. Xenophobia in South Africa, a Pan-Africanist perspective, and the impact of Pan-Africanist rhetoric on African public policy, and also Black consciousness, agenda setting, and public policy in South Africa. Explores how media and government shape policy through ideological frameworks like Black consciousness. So that is the long introduction to my guest. I'm expecting to see him show up at any given moment. I do have a short piece of video up on the screen, and I'm going to share this video with you if you don't mind. The video is entitled, what's the title of the video? Is entitled Western Cape, Groups in South Africa Region Push for Cessation. So let me show that short piece of video, and hopefully, I pray that my guest will be joining us here by the time you watch this video. It's just about 2 minutes, 27 seconds long. Let's go ahead and play this short piece of video.
Xolile Mpini hasn't had a job for more than 5 years. He runs an advocacy group for the unemployed. Here in South Africa's Western Cape province, about 29% of people don't have jobs. The national average is nearly 35%. Olile is unhappy with the government's policies.
The labor laws are not addressing the issues that currently exist of unemployment. The labor laws speaks to direct to the interest of those who are in the working environment, not outside the working environment.
The forum has thousands of members who support a call for the Western Cape to secede from South Africa. The province has the second largest economy in the country. Those supporting an independent Cape say a corrupt national government is draining its resources to aid poorer provinces.
So effectively the people of the Western Cape never get their democratic will. They're always excluded from the system. They never get the government they vote for. And the consequences of that are quite significant, because as South Africa is being badly managed and run into the ground, the people of the Western Cape are then suffering the consequences of a government they didn't elect and one that they can't remove at the ballot box.
South Africa is made up of 9 provinces. 8 of them are governed by the African National Congress. The opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, has run the Western Cape since 1999. While the party's not supported the call for secession, it has pushed for a federal system. The Cape Independence Party says recent polls suggest 58% of Western Cape voters support the move for Cape independence, but that figure's been disputed. Those opposed to the idea say it's racially motivated and discriminates against the largely mixed race and black, often poorer communities in a province with a more prosperous white minority.
I cannot support anything which seeks to create a folk state where the beneficiaries of apartheid will still own the land and hold the levers of economic control. It can't be allowed to happen. These people are seeking to create 2 things: A, a master race; B, a subservient slave race. I'm not a slave. I cannot support the call. Secession is a very good idea, but not in the terms of reference that they're using.
Cape Town, the capital of the Western Cape, has great economic disparities often defined by race. Critics say the chances of secession are low. Many argue the call for secession by those living in the Western Cape has little merit and will go nowhere, and that it lacks constitutional backing. But this isn't the first time there have been calls from groups of people for their own nation states within South Africa. And rather than being viewed as wishful thinking, it may instead be an expression of anger against the governing African National Congress. Famida Miller, Al Jazeera, South Africa.
All right. That report was from Al Jazeera, South Africa. And I think Al Jazeera is among the most reliable news sources that we should turn to when looking for news about Africa and around the world. It's not perfect. Al Jazeera is not perfect. Al Jazeera, I think, in my own opinion, strives a little too hard to be neutral in its broadcast, and in being neutral and attempting to be neutral in its broadcast, I personally think that they could come down a little harder. But when it comes to reporting that's independent of the NATO-based alliance, I think Al Jazeera is one of the best that we could turn to. Now, I'm still waiting for Dr. Shechaba Khoapa to join me today. I'm going to check one more time with the communications network that I was tuning into him with. I'm looking at WhatsApp, and I'm just not seeing his link. The last link I saw from him was from yesterday, 7:06 p.m., and he said he would be in the broadcast. So we're going to hold out that if nothing else, he could join us. I want to talk about this idea, Western Cape secession movement. And I hope, Brother Juma, you are in the house. Queen Mother Kashiba, I hope you are tuned in today. Now, here's the thing. I was looking for videos specifically on the Western Cape secession movement. And all you saw was not the group of Boers that had formed these small enclaves. What you saw was Cape Town, a very modern city, a beautiful city. Cape Town is one of the most beautiful cities in Africa, and there's no doubt about that. A beautiful city with a mixed population, and a very high unemployment rate. So I could go into more details about what is. Let me just ask the question right now while I'm thinking about it. What is the ethnic mix? What is the ethnic mix? Bear with me. I'm using AI search engine. What is the ethnic mix of the Western Cape province in South Africa? So that's the question I'm putting on the table. What is the ethnic mix of the Western Cape province in South Africa? It's coming right up, and I'm going to read to you the results that is shared. The Western Cape province in South Africa has a diverse mix, with approximately half its population identifying as colored, a group with mixed ancestry from indigenous Khoisan, African, European, and Asian backgrounds. This group constitutes a plurality in the province, making up about 42.1% of the population, according to the 2022 census. The second largest group is Black African, accounting for about 45.7% of Cape Town's population, which is the province's largest city. White South Africans make up about 16.2% of Cape Town residents, while Asian or Indian South Africans represent 1.6% of the city's population. The province is also home to a significant number of Cape Malays, a subgroup of colored people with notably Malay heritage and a distinct cultural identity. The region's ethnic diversity is rooted in centuries of intermixing, beginning with the Dutch Cape Colony in the 17th century, where European settlers, Khoi, and enslaved people from Asia and Africa intermarried, forming the foundation of the colored population. Afrikaans is the most widely spoken language in the province, followed by Xhosa and English, reflecting its multilingual heritage. So I think that kind of betrays the idea that people have been holding on to, talking about. I think it betrays the idea that this is strictly driven by the Boers and dominated by the Boers. So this is the first myth that we get a chance to bust today. And I have a number of other things that I can pull up. The Western Cape Cessation Movement, often referred to as Cape Exit, advocates for the independence of the Western Cape province from South Africa. This movement has evolved from a fringe idea into a more visible political discourse, particularly in response to perceived economic mismanagement, corruption, and racial policies under the national government led by the African National Congress. Proponents argue that the Western Cape, with its distinct cultural, linguistic, and economic identity, should have the right to self-determination. The movement includes various groups, such as the Cape Independence Party, Cape Exit, the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, CIAG, Cape Exit, Gatval Capetonian, and the Sovereign State of Good Hope. These groups differ in strategy, but share the goal of greater autonomy or full independence. Among the key arguments for Cape Exit or independence, supporters of the Cape Independence emphasize several core arguments. Number one, economic contribution. The Western Cape is one of only two provinces alongside Gauteng that contributes more in taxes than it receives from the national ficus. Advocates claim that the local revenues should be reinvested locally rather than redistributed nationally. Point two, and I do not agree with that point. I think that the wealth of South Africa, no matter where you live, should be distributed amongst the various people of South Africa. That is, in essence, a socialist position that I have there, the Christian position. Point two, good governance. The province is governed by the Democratic Alliance, DA, which contrasts itself with the ANC-led national government, citing lower corruption and better administrative performance. Point three, cultural and linguistic identity. The movement highlights the distinct heritage of the region, including its Afrikaans-speaking colored population, Khoisan roots, and historical legacy as a former British colony with self-governance between 1872 and 1910. Point four, self-determination. Citing Section 235 of the South African Constitution and the international law, example given the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, proponents argue for the right to pursue independence through legal means. Going further, political and institutional developments. While full secession remains constitutionally unimplemented, there have been notable political shifts. In 2020, the Freedom Front Plus, FF Plus Party, representing Afrikaner interests, officially endorsed Cape independence. Point two, the Western Cape Devolution Working Group was formed in 2022, bringing together the DA, and that is the political party, and pro-independence civil society groups to explore greater political autonomy, including control over fiscal policy, trade, and natural resources. Point three, the DA has pushed for constitutional reforms to centralize power, especially during coalition negotiations post-2024 elections, signaling a mainstream of devolutionist ideas, even if not full cessation. And point number four, these developments indicate growing institutional legitimacy for autonomy discussions, even if full independence is not the official DA policy. And that is, of course, the Democratic Alliance, the DA. So, going into legal and constitutional challenges. The path to cessation faces significant legal barriers, including, point one, Section 74 of the Constitution governs constitutional amendments, including territorial changes. Such an amendment would require a 2/3 majority in the National Assembly and support for 6 out of 9 provinces in the National Council of Provinces. Point two, the ANC holds a dominant position in both houses and has consistently opposed any referendum on cessation. Constitutional expert Pierre De Vos has stated that the idea of a legally binding referendum on independence is a, quote, pipe dream under current political conditions. Now here, I want to do one thing, check right real quick and see. I heard a noise and I don't see my guest did not show up after that noise. So it looks like we're over halfway through the program. Couple more points. The central government maintains that there is nothing to negotiate regarding cessation, rooted in the ANC's historical preference for a strong central state. And point four, while activists cite legal avenues, the political will at the national level is absent. So, couple more points about this whole idea of cessation. The South African Constitution, Section 235, states public support and petitions. Public sentiment appears to be shifting, at least in the Western Cape. A 2021 poll, this has nothing to do with Section 235, 2021 poll suggested that a majority of Western Cape residents support holding a referendum on independence. Point 2, the group Cape Exit claims over 830,000 signatures on a petition calling for greater autonomy or independence. And again, we did ask the question, what is the population? We didn't ask the population, what is the ethnic mix of the Western Cape province? But I'm going to ask is, what is the population of the Western Cape province and South Africa? So let me just click on that in a search, AI search real quickly in the background. What's the population of the Western Cape province as of the 2022 South African census? The population of the Western Cape province was 7,433,020 people. The total population of South Africa, according to the same census, was 62,027,000. So therefore, the 7.4 represent about 1/8 to almost 1/9 of that population. So if let me calculate this real quick, because you do want accuracy. You don't want me to just throw numbers out here. So we're looking at, the number is 62. No, the number is 7,433,020 divided by the larger number, which is 62,027,503. So let's get that calculation. So therefore, the population wishing to succeed in the Western Cape, or no, not the population, the Western Cape population represents only less than 12% of the total population of South Africa. And they have 833,000 signatures on a petition calling for greater autonomy or independence. So legally, this is not going to happen in the near future, not anytime soon. We can see by the numbers there. They just don't have the numbers to be able to legally pull away and form their own nation. Point 3, however, electoral performance of the pro-independence parties remains weak. The Cape Independence Party only won 2 seats in the city of Cape Town in the 2021 local elections, despite a successful legal challenge that increased their vote count. And lastly, analysts such as Gray Dynamics assess that the movement is unlikely to reach its target of 1.6 million supporters in the near term, indicating a gap between rhetoric and mass mobilization. Under the category of criticism and opposition, the movement faces substantial criticism, such as, point 1, critics argue that critics argue of it being a vehicle for white and colored elite interests, potentially driven by nostalgia for pre-1994 political structures or even implicit racism, despite claims of non-racialism. Point 2, the Western Cape Anti-Eviction Campaign, AEC, and other grassroots movements oppose the idea, arguing it distracts from real issues like housing, inequality, and service delivery. Point 3, disinformation researcher Jean Leroux has highlighted that some petitions lack verification, with fake details easily submitted, raising questions about the authenticity of support claims. Final point. Some view the Democratic Alliance's engagement with cessationist groups as politically opportunistic, using the threat of independence to extract concessions from the national government without genuine intent to secede. So, in conclusion of this section of the study, the Western Cape secession movement has gained increased visibility and discourse legitimacy, particularly through alliances with established political actors and media amplification. However, constitutional, political, and social hurdles remain formidable. While demands for greater autonomy and fiscal control reflect real grievances, full independence remains a distant prospect under the current legal and political framework. And on that note, I do see my brother Shechaba, Dr. Shechaba Khoapa. I see his head is poked up. I'm going to add him to the stage here today on LIB Radio. Khoapa, welcome to you, brother Dr. Shechaba. I've been on the air now for 40 minutes.
I'm sorry for the
And
delay.
I
Can you
cannot.
hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm not hearing you in my headphones. Give me a second. Let me switch this over right now, so I will hear you in my headphones only. And I have you here right now. And welcome, welcome. And if you can, your camera is pointing up towards the ceiling. There's a bright light up there, so your face is gone completely dark. There, that's much, much better. Okay, well, we have talked about a lot today. I gave your extensive introduction at the beginning of the program, and I don't think people will want to hear that again. But you are a professor of numerous subjects and topics at Witwatersrand University in Johannesburg. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct.
And let me just real quickly, you are involved in public policy analysis, business strategy, data analysis, organizational leadership, instructional design, and multimedia development. Talk to us about your experience there at the university and working with South Africans.
Well, it's been interesting, and I don't want to confuse some of the listeners and everything that
Mm-hmm.
I am Dr. Shechaba. Father, I don't know what kind of introduction you may have given, but for our listeners that are contemporary, yes, I'm South African born. However, I am a product of political exile, with my father having been involved in the Black consciousness movement. And as a result, I uh, grew up in the United States because I don't want listeners to be confused by my accent. In that I was educated in Ohio, um, primarily grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and then completed my studies in Washington, D.C. I'm an advocate of what happens within the political structure, although I'm not involved in government. However, I'm a great observer of what is transpiring, whether it be within South Africa and whether it be in the United States. I'm affiliated with both. However, going to your topic that you specifically have outlined, I'm here and I want to be able to address some of the questions that might be arising within the topics that you have.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just want to note a couple of papers. I had cited these earlier, but I do think this is very, very distinct for our conversation. You did publish your college dissertation, your doctoral dissertation, a case study on poverty and inequality in post-apartheid South Africa, examining government policy and practices from 1994 to 2012. That is relevant for today's conversation because among the many issues calling for a cessation or Cape exit is the distinction between the poverty levels there and across the country. And they are complaining that they give more to the federal government in tax revenues than they get as benefit from being a part of South Africa. You choose to comment on that?
My comment would be that I think there is a misrepresentation as to what is poverty and what is inequality. You know, someone can say that just because I live below a lower poverty level does not make me equal. You can be unequal because you don't have the same things that someone else has. It does not necessarily mean that you're living in poverty. It just means that you are trying to put your particular level at that of someone that you think you should also obtain.
Okay, so therefore, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, all I was saying, and you didn't, all I was just saying is that we have to dispel the perceptions of what poverty and inequality is. And that has been the focus of where I'm trying to make this misnomer understood.
Hmm. Also, there has been, I believe, a misperception by, I will call them more reactionary Pan Africans. Now, I'm not condemning them, I love them as Pan Africans, but I tend to think that Pan Africans can be reactionary just as other groups. But reactionary Pan Africans in this country believe that this whole movement of the Western Cape cessation is being driven by the Boers, when in actuality, the population of white South Africans in that Cape Town province are only 16.2% of the population, and not all of those are Afrikaner or Afrikaner ideology, while the majority population is the coloreds, with about, not the majority, but the largest population is the coloreds mixed group, making up about 42% of the population of Western Cape. Your comment?
My comment is that we have to actually diagnose as to, and I'm going to actually ask your question, respond to your question with a question. If we're speaking
Mm-hmm.
about this idea, is that yes, there is that idea that, or misconception that, you know, as you were speaking about the colored population and whatnot, because even before we speak about, um, and I wish I would have been here earlier to talk about, the idea of Africana refugee, because most of them are not Afrikaners that reside in the Cape. So when
Mm-hmm.
I ask you, back to you, as people are wanting to claim some kind of self-determination, how does a population such as the African American population feel about that notion of what has been now been created the state of Orania?
Yeah, the state of Orania is that's the name of a province there in the Western Cape region. Am I correct?
It's correct, and it's not even a state, although they're trying to establish it as one. However,
Mm-hmm.
it's become a place of self-determination for Afrikaners to say that we're preserving something that they have.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to hear what the other views, whether it's African American views, whether it's Western views, whether it's European views, how do people feel about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I will answer your question directly to the best of my abilities. I must preference my response to that question that I am not a reactionary Pan Africanism. I am a conservative and well, I take everything in context of how it appears around the world. Personally, I think Orania, the Afrikaner movement there in the Western Cape province, is such a small group, a minority group, that it has virtually no real clout other than the clout of the noise that they can make. Now, we did see they were able to make enough noise to catch the attention of Donald Trump, who you can recall the photo of him and Ramaphosa, and Trump is holding some pictures that he got that really in the end didn't mean anything, but he's holding something in his hand, and he's accusing the South African government of causing genocide against these people of Orania. And so the reality is that was far, far more noise than it was real substance. When it comes to the Western Cape cessation movement, there is a lot more substance there, but it's still a minority group that's really not making its effort to look out for South Africa as a whole. Did that answer your question?
It does, but then
Mm-hmm.
it poses another question. As you were talking, as I was reading through your notes, as to how the Western province wants to create that as a state as well. And what justification, other than the footnotes that you had sent, what justification, what reality, what purpose would that entail? Unless now they want to involve, because now even in the Western Cape, now the Khoisans are trying to make an independent state. So I guess a simpler question is, what is the end game?
Mm-hmm. The end game is fractionalization, disunity. The Khoisan, of all of the groups calling for an independent state, I would, as a Pan-African, non-reactionary Pan-African, I would say the Khoisan probably have the most legitimate claim for an independence or autonomy, autonomous province or so. And they could do that, self-governing autonomy, that's what that means, self-governing province. They could do that without having to separate themselves from the country. It would essentially model the example of the United States with the so-called Indian reservations, the Native Americans, and they weren't the first peoples reservations. There are independent nations within this larger nation. They are autonomous and self-governing, but still they do fit into the larger profile of being within the American tapestry.
Do you believe in your analysis? And I'm saying this as you're saying. I'm not a reactionary
Mm-hmm.
Pan-Africanist, but I'm an active Pan-Africanist. As
Mm-hmm.
to where do we now start to draw the line between what is sovereignty and what is unity?
That's a real good question. Ultimately, as a Pan-African, it is the unity of as many people as possible that we can put together under the umbrella of Pan-Africanism. That's the highest priority. No matter where you come from, if you are a black man, Peter Tosh sang, you are an African. If you're a black woman, you are an African. Similarly, people like Kwame Ture and no small number of others, Stephen Biko, as we are celebrating the voices from South Africa and many other voices from South Africa, they all said that all African people, no matter what country you're in, no matter these artificial boundaries and borders that were created in Berlin, you are an African. And under the umbrella of Pan-Africanism, I would say solidarity is the must. Insofar as sovereignty, I would say we must be sovereign from other groups as they have been artificially imposed upon Africa. The colonists were sovereign from them, but also the groups that the colonists brought in to support their colonialism operation across Africa, such as Indians, Malay, Chinese, and other groups. We need to establish our sovereignty distinct from them, especially on lands such as our own, lands that once were dominated by populations of only African people, including the Khoisan.
No, that's a beautiful answer, and I agree with you 110%. But I guess it goes back, and it's probably a more extensive kind of notion as to sovereignty or whatnot, because then I think we as Pan-Africanists, not reactionary, but as actionary Pan-Africanists, what do we do to actually, especially as you say that the topic has been about the Southern African region, what do we do about the concept of Ubuntu? I am you because you are me. I am me because you are you. What would be your steps towards that?
That's a good question as well. And I do need you, I want you to see if you can get your face more clear on the camera, the microphone, if you can hold the camera up a little bit higher because it's making the bottom of your face disappear. And hopefully that will give you, our audience, a better view of you. Ubuntu, from my opinion, I think that the planet is not ready for this concept we know as Ubuntu. Personally, I think that African concepts, ideologies, these concepts of spirituality and unity, etc., they far exceed what is happening in the world today. I think the world is suffering terribly because they will not listen to South Africa. They will not listen to Ubuntu. Look at what is happening in Ukraine and Russia, as well as the genocide against the Palestinian people in the Gaza. South Africa stood up with a very strong voice, and they added that voice to the world. But the world cannot catch up with where South Africa was 2-3 years ago. So personally, I love the idea of Ubuntu. I share Ubuntu with everyone in my inner circle, and I open up more people to join my circle under the banner of Ubuntu. But personally, I think it's a concept that the world has yet to catch up with. Your thoughts?
I think you are correct. It's a concept that I think you said it best, that the rest of the world needs to catch up with. But also, what do we as African people, whether you're from Ghana, whether you're from Guinea-Bissau, whether you're from Chicago, where do we get that concept? You know, Brother Keely, we used to have this conversation a very long time ago that if
That's right.
when we were talking about how do we liberate Africa as a content, as a continent, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you, and I'm going to quote you specifically. You said no. If Africa could lock its borders, continental borders for Africa could be liberated. Because if Hitler was able to do it in 7, where do we fail?
Mm-hmm. Now, your microphone broke up for a second. You from after if Africa could, we missed it after that point. Something about its borders.
Okay, let me repeat. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
if Africa could lock all its borders for
Mm-hmm.
10 years, Africa could be liberated within 10 years. If they work collectively, they could be liberated within 10 years. And you even went as far as to say that if Hitler could do it in 7, what, where do we fail?
Yeah, I'm not going to use Hitler as an example. I will use China as I think the best example of them closing their borders. They did that. You could not go to China if you were from the Western ideology or capitalism. You could not go to China from about, what was it, 78 years or so. So the China closed its borders, and then it gradually opened them up under Xi Jinping But what they did was they concentrated on solving the basic problem across China. The basic problems across China were extreme poverty. They were living on $3, $2 a day like the rest of the world in many places. China eradicated 40% of its people living in extreme poverty. China electrified the whole country. Everywhere you went in China, they focused on bringing electricity, clean electricity when possible, to the population. And with that extraction from poverty, with that electrification, then the industry of China turned on, and you and I can now see the result. Chinese industry has become the dominant economic power in the world in purchasing power parity, and Chinese people have ascended to the top rung, equaling or exceeding all other nations around the world, including United States, UK, Canada, and even rivaling Japan. So personally, I see not the Hitler or Nazi model as any example for us. Point number two, and this is, I think, a very important point, I think that we should close Africa off from external powers to some extent, because all great nations trade with other nations. But we really do need to drop the European imposed internal boundaries and languages. We need to drop those as soon as we possibly can. It's through a unified Africa with the least number of languages we could possibly get away with. That's, I think, the best chance that we have of freeing Africa up, so that was predicted at the UN, that this would be the African century, will take place. And at the end of a century of tremendous self-sacrifice on the part of people like us, at the end of that century, our great-great-grandchildren will inherit the greatest Africa civilization that has ever been known since the days of the most ancient civilizations. I know that's kind of a long response.
No, I think it was very beautiful and eloquent. I guess as far as moving towards, this broadcast, if there were other areas that you wanted to cover, please draw me in.
Yeah, let me draw you in. There's one very important thing we do need to talk about. The South African news landscape is marked by significant developments across politics, crime, and international relations. Number one, the story of what is happening with economic freedom fighter, party leader Julius Malema. I understand he's gone silent. Was he facing some charges related to gun charges?
As far as criminal charges, I'm not aware of. I know that there was a way to try to silence him because he was actually pushing the, land reform issue, and that was not sitting well with potentially land owners. Now, we can go into the whole land dispossession and all of that, but he was pushing stronger for that, and he just came across as a militant voice. Now, as far as criminal charges, I am not aware. But other than that, as you said, he went silent. I think maybe it was just to quail the notion of the Afrikaner farmer massacre, which did not exist.
Well, what I do have on my desk, that Julius Malema was scheduled to be in the East London Magistrates Court to deliver judgment in the long-running firearms discharge trial of economic freedom fighter leader Julius Malema, who faces charges related to allegedly firing a rifle at a 2018 rally. And that's the charge against him. And personally, that the 2018 is quite some time ago. He was still in the news. I can recall during the whole debate about, is there a genocide against whites in South Africa? They were pulling up pieces of videos of Julius Malema at Julius Malema at rallies, advocating in their minds for violence against the whites there in South Africa. So some of us are Pan-Africans, are concerned that Julius Malema has disappeared from the media, and we do want some sort of clarity about what is happening there. Okay, so there are some other issues related to South Africa that I think you would be qualified to comment on. Um, are you there with me? You still there? Okay, the screen froze there for a minute. Um, Another issue, the Democratic Alliance has pledged to closely monitor the outcomes of a special investigating unit's report on corruption at Tembisa Hospital, where over 2 billion rand in irregularities were uncovered. The question of corruption across Africa is still, unfortunately, much too persistent. Can we talk about corruption in South Africa?
Well, the one thing I know that I've done in my research is that corruption, you'll find, it honestly does not happen at the higher state level. Most of the corruption that occurs, it happens at the middle management level. So that if corruption occurs, it happens at the middle management level. And therefore the government leaves itself unresponsive or unapplicable to that. However, it could be handled from the higher ups and then it's distributed in that manner. So as far as corruption, I think corruption is not going to be, and I'm just speaking from the South African perspective, you are not going to be able to handle corruption at the head. Corruption is actually happening at middle management. And lower management is not going to be able to engage with middle management. And middle management is actually being directed by upper management. So I don't know what kind of system of checks and balances that can be put in as to figure out how certain things are happening. And that's why you'll find a population that actually they blame government for everything. But you can't actually blame government because government is not doing it. Maybe government gives the directive, but you can't actually blame them because they don't have anything on their fingerprints.
Mm-hmm.
So as dealing with corruption, I think maybe it has to start with middle management.
Mm-hmm. Now,
But that's something I don't know how we can fix.
what we do know, China, in dealing with corruption, if you were a Chinese official, whether you were elected official or going down into the upper ranks of corporation, etc., and you engaged in corrupt practices, bribery, theft, and other corrupt practices, such as manipulating the markets, the Chinese sentenced them to death for a certain period of time until the corruption stopped. Is that a solution, do you think, that could work for South Africa?
You know, it's funny that you say that because I was involved in a radio show where they said, Robben Island, they need to not revert it from being a museum, but actually turn it into a prison so that every corrupt government official, they are sentenced there. And so you use this example of China as how they were sentenced in a certain way. I don't know. That might be a good model to follow. And if that model was followed, I can sit here by myself and say I support it.
Yeah, that's a hard one because as African people, we understand ultimately that money versus humanity, we balance towards humanity in the majority of cases. But at the same time, insofar as corruption in Africa, it is taking away from the humanity of the nation. And it's so depleting this morality and humanity and ethics across the nation that huge numbers of people are suffering and suffering. So we have to, at certain point, I think we're going to have to make a judgment that corruption has got to go. It's got to go by the end of this decade at the latest. And to do so, we're going to have to make punishment for corruption so absolutely unbearable that people will understand I can't risk that for myself.
No, you're correct. And I think that's the whole notion of, let's reopen Robben Island as a prison for all corruptors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Let's
is fortunately Parliament is right there in Cape Town, so we can just ship them over the boat same day.
Cape Town is the capital of South Africa, am I correct?
No, the capital is Pretoria. Pretoria is the
Oh, that's right.
executive capital. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Okay.
Bloemfontein is the judiciary, and then Cape Town is the legislative.
Okay, gotcha. So the government is in different parts of the country.
Yeah, but everything goes down in Cape Town.
Mm-hmm. There are a few smaller issues that I have yet to describe today. The South African Reserve Bank has kept its key lending rate unchanged at 7% as it assesses the impact of previous cape of rate cuts and weighs economic stability. Give us your impression of the South African economy and the current strength of the rand.
Well, the current strength of the rand has been actually kind of determined by actually the economic structures that are going on in the world. Um, because the rand has actually been basing itself, number one, on the strength of the US dollar, as the South African rand has slowly pulled away from the whole BRICS, Brazil, India, has pulled away. Unfortunately, South Africa, the strength of the rand has actually been based on the investment in economy of number one, the United States, and then number two, what's going on in Europe. The GDP of South Africa, if South Africa was to be independent economically, they would not be able to cover the GDP annually at all. So you find that the rand is actually becoming a puppet currency to other nations. And so the South African rand cannot, at least from my economic standpoint, cannot sustain itself. And so hopefully I'm answering your question correctly. However, I don't think that the South African rand has sustainability outside of the support of other economic powers outside of it.
Mm-hmm. Now, it used to be, can correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe 20 years ago, the South African rand was considered to be Africa's most stable um, currency, largely because of the size and the impact of South Africa's industrial, manufacturing, and mining sector. What went wrong?
I think what happened is that when you had post 1994, as you're speaking 20 years, I think post 1994 and a supposedly imposed unified nation and things of that nation, of that notion. I'm sorry. Where I think the mining industry went down. It went down because before, those that were working in the mining sectors were kind of forced to. I don't like to use that word, but I think they were kind of forced to be in that kind of industry. So when you build an industry and you build an economy that now says that, okay, it's independent, because now you have to have people that are going to work those mines. You have to have people that are going to build that infrastructure. But when you liberate a people and then they say, well, we don't have to do this anymore. And I know I'm being, very soliloquial about this,
Mhm.
but I think some of it had to do with, basically the industry that it used to have. It lost it lost its backing. And when I say it lost its backing, it lost its employment, it lost its people, it lost everything. I don't
Mm.
know if I'm making any sense here, but when
Well,
put it this
I
way,
know
when
where.
people just say I quit, what do you
Yeah,
do?
yeah, I do. I see your problem, no, your challenge, no doubt. I do have a couple of comments in the house. For Africa One, China and Hotep, Brother Kitty, and Global Family on this Earth Day of the Honorable Nat Turner, born 1800, praise be his eternal warrior name. She also writes, my concern is the spiritual and psychological impact on African children if sovereignty of the soil is undermined in such a racialized and political manner. That's a good comment from For Africa One, writing from the UK. Do you want to respond to her? The political
Oh,
of
did you want me to?
the psychological impact on the children going forward.
Oh no, I actually no. Her comment is very well taken because as I've been teaching history from the 1800s, and also we do history from 1750 and before 1750 and after 1750, that it's very important, as actually I'm mentoring my young teachers who are going into the field, as to how do we encapsulate a good history without being, handcuffed to what the curriculum teaches. Like, for instance, if you go to grades lower than 7, they actually teach the history of South Africa began in 1994. So all of the previous history has kind of been wiped away. And now you have to find a way as to how do you now try to bring those factors in without losing your job, because the job says teach it like this. And that's been one of the most interesting things as I'm teaching methods, like how do you find a way of knowing that this is what the curriculum wants you to do, and then this is what you need to be consciously aware of. So the
Mm-hmm.
comment of that was made is very important, is how do we transfer information in a contemporary modern time that it doesn't distract from what they are being told to teach, but also empower them in what they need to reach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good points you make. A couple more questions, and we're going to begin to wrap it up here. Um, I have on the describe South Africa's military hardware capacity. What weapons does South Africa manufacture?
And you ask such a painful thing in regards to that, because the military essentially is dead. Um, there's no investment made into the military. I think last time I did some kind of research inventory, I think they might have one operating jet. They don't have um, a sufficient navy. They don't. I don't know why, but there's not enough investment put into the military. You have soldiers that are resigning from the military because they're not equipped with weapons or anything. Um, I'm not sure, but we can speculate. But no, the military in South Africa, I mean, I hate to say it like this, is non-existent.
Hmm. Yeah, that's real interesting because in putting together today's show, I actually did, and I'm going to open this image file. Bear with me. Let's see if it does open. Yeah, I did put up this image, and I put it on the stage. I don't know whether you can see your screen, but the image that I did put up, they did show South African, this military plane. It's a small plane. It's not a huge thing. It's a single pilot plane. And South Africa's manufacturing industry. So there is something there, but it seems to me that, it's just not enough. But wasn't South Africa regarded at the transfer of power to be one of Africa's largest military hardware manufacturers? And from my understanding, that persisted for some time.
No, it did. And as you are able to pull up some images, basically the images that you're pulling up, you're basically seeing is what was there, but it's inoperative. And as you're
Mm,
saying, before negotiations and things of that, I mean, South Africa was the only country in Africa that owned a nuclear bomb, and all of that dismantling was a part of that.
hmm
And so, if South Africa was to be invaded today, I don't think that South Africa militarily, besides feet on the ground, could actually defend itself, because the infrastructure that you're seeing is infrastructure that has been there
Okay, we're losing you.
has not been maintained
Okay,
and
couple
has
more
not
questions. Okay, we're losing you. You're losing your signal.
Yeah, I was losing it, but I'm here. I hope I didn't lose too much.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up. I have two more questions, real quick. What do South Africans think about Trump and the right wing American government, especially after the sanctions being used as a weapon against South Africa? Is there any concern that the U.S. will increase hostilities to the point of open conflict?
No, I think the average opinion of South Africans in regards to Trump and his administration is kind of laughed at. It's not taken seriously. And so, even with the whole refugee program that was happening and everything, it's kind of laughed at,
Mm-hmm.
even from serious political minds. Um, it's not taken seriously as long as it doesn't affect South Africans in South Africa. To them, it's a mockery that what Donald Trump is doing. And it's a mockery to feel like, and they've expressed it, that why is Donald Trump actually making such a mockery of the United States?
Okay. Two more questions. Cyril Ramaphosa, the President Cyril Ramaphosa, addressed the 80th UN General Assembly, accusing Israel of committing genocide, a statement that has drawn international attention. Talk to us about the resentment of Israel. Is this resentment of Israel happening in South Africa? What kind of support is being given to Zionism in South Africa?
No, I think there's no, like, how should I say, a strong resentment towards Israel. Um, I think it's more about the resentment of the injustice, what's happening in Gaza, and the idea of having people express themselves religiously, whether it's through Zionism or anything. There's no direct position as to say that Israel's this. I think it's more of a humanitarian standpoint that no, people should be able to practice and do what they need to do without the hostility of any outside opposition.
All right. And the final question. The country is also facing severe weather warming, with heavy rains continuing to affect KwaZulu-Natal province, urging residents to exercise caution. Are you feeling the impact of global warming in Azania?
Me personally, I have not. However, with the rising waters and the global warming situation that you're referring to, I think that's more of a global issue than it is necessarily a South African issue. However,
Mm-hmm.
I think those things need to be dealt with in a certain way because if water levels are rising, because KwaZulu Natal basically sits on the coast, so obviously, it's going to be very different, just the same way that earthquakes are not going to affect the east side of United States, then it's going to affect the west. I think there's something that needs to be done as far as to disparaging anything that could make those things possible. But what do we do with Mother Nature other than just listen to what she's saying?
Mm. And truly here. Okay, we're going to begin to wrap it up. We have about 2 minutes. I'm going to hit the button, taking us out of the program. Are there any other topics that about South Africa, any other dynamics happening there in South Africa that you do want our global audience to know about?
I know I think we covered it all. And me just being an activist Pan Africanist, I would want to ask the audience that's listening is what can we do collectively to try to stem some of the things that we have been discussing in this broadcast?
Yeah. My opinion is Pan Africanism or perish. It's been said in no small number of times. Your father, the distinguished professor, was a serious contributor to Pan African Congress, and we honor his name on today's broadcast. He is a wonderful man, and you, of course, have some very large footprints that you are walking in, following your father's wonderful presence.
No, thank you so much for that. And so I don't know, dear brother, if there can actually be a part two of this, but you'll let me know and you'll reach out to me if that's going to be something. But I truly thank you for giving me the voice to speak on this broadcast, and if there's any other broadcast where you feel is relevant, uh, please let me know.
Absolutely. It was absolutely wonderful having you on today. And we will be doing this again. We're just going to set it up. We're going to make sure you get your camera set up just right. Um,
Yes.
as long as I have been doing this 23 years of broadcasting, and of course 20 years of broadcasting the video, I'm a very much a stickler about how we do want to present ourselves when we are on camera, and we're going to do the best we can. I'll help you to set up your system the way I have mine set up, and you will be looking good. And we'll put that camera on a tripod. First and foremost, you got to put your camera, it's got to be on a tripod because the camera moves around and it's just really a little challenging. But hey, we'll work all that out off the air. Final thoughts you want to share with our listening audience before I hit the go button?
Just to say thank you.
All right. We appreciate you being with us. Our guest has been He's joined us today from Azania, South Africa. Dr. Shechaba Khoapa is awesome. He's done a lot of things. He's doing a lot of things at the university there, and we love you for joining us here on your LIB Radio. My LIB Radio is yours, and we are one family, Ubuntu. Thank you so much, my dear brother. Sawubona.
So.
And on that note, we are out of here. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. You've been tuned into LIB Radio. We want to be your favorite. If you are in Las Vegas this weekend, we're going to be holding our monthly first Saturday vegan feast. Do come through. Join us. Text me at area code 702-580-0662. Text me. Don't call. And I will respond to each and every one of you. If you want the books, you want to know more about what we do, you let me know. We got your back. On your favorite, we are LIB Radio, LIB TV. We are living in black.com. Peace, y'all.